And today, a very defeated, frankly pathetic-looking Joe Biden, well, he sauntered out to the podium 90 minutes late to deliver these very uninspiring remarks. Take a look.
And if Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared to go further as with sanctions. Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? Yesterday, the world heard clearly the full extent of Vladimir Putin's twisted rewrite of history, going back more than a century, as he waxed eloquently, noting that, well, I'm not going to go into it, but nothing in Putin's lengthy remarks indicate any interest in pursuing real dialogue on European security in the year 2022.
You know, no doubt, Vladimir Putin is just shaking in his boots. This is really beyond humiliating for our country. Now, of course, Biden did announce new sanctions today, but as one top Russian diplomat put it, Moscow doesn't give an atom shift about any sanctions. And why would they? Russia's main source of revenue is in the form of the production of oil and gas. China, they buy a tremendous amount of this gas, and so does Western Europe, our allies, because we're not producing it for them and making money and creating jobs and lowering this 40-year high of inflation. Make no mistake, that oil and gas will continue to flow no matter what Russia does in Ukraine. In fact, much of Europe, especially Germany, well, they're dependent on Russian oil and gas, which is a big part of this problem. Now, last year, even America, our country, Joe Biden's first year in office, imported a whopping 230 million barrels of oil from Russia, Putin's Russia. Joe's been begging Russia, OPEC repeatedly and being rejected repeatedly to produce more oil to drive down the price of oil and the price of a gallon of gasoline. We have more than they have. Why don't we produce it ourselves, Joe? This is madness. This is insanity. For years, many of the world's leaders have been perfectly happy to make Putin and Russia rich again and a cheap supply of energy available for all. Now, in 2018, what we're about to show you is an epic face-to-face, complete beatdown with then-President Donald Trump rebuking European leaders, getting right in their face for their dependence on Russia for their energy, helping make Russia rich again, while we pay the bill for NATO to protect them from Russia. It's a long clip. It's worth watching. While you're watching, ask yourself, do you think Joe Biden could ever be capable of this level of passionate fighting for what is in our country's best interest? Here's the full exchange.
I think it's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries, and then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia, where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened. And I think we have to talk to Germany about it. On top of that, Germany is just paying a little bit over 1%, whereas the United States, in actual numbers, is paying 4.2% of a much larger GDP. So I think that's inappropriate also. You know, we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting everybody, and yet we're paying a lot of money to protect. Now, this has been going on for decades. This has been brought up by other presidents, but other presidents never did anything about it because I don't think they understood it or they just didn't want to get involved. But I have to bring it up because I think it's very unfair to our country. It's very unfair to our taxpayer. And And I think that these countries have to step it up, not over a 10-year period, they have to step it up immediately. Germany is a rich country. They talk about they're going to increase it a tiny bit by 2030. Well, they could increase it immediately tomorrow and have no problem. I don't think it's fair to the United States. So we're going to have to do something because we're not going to put up with it. We can't put up with it, and it's inappropriate. So we have to talk about, everybody's talking about it all over the world. They'll say, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to be protecting you from Russia, but why are you paying billions of dollars to Russia for energy? Why are countries in NATO, namely Germany, having a large percentage of their energy needs paid to Russia and taken care of by Russia? Now, if you look at it, Germany is a captive of Russia because they supply. They got rid of their coal plants. They got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia. I think it's something that NATO has to look at. I think it's very inappropriate. You and I agree that it's inappropriate. I don't know what you can do about it now, but it certainly doesn't seem to make sense that they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and now we have to defend them against Russia.
NATO is an alliance of 29 nations, and there are sometimes differences and different views and also some disagreements. And the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany is one issue where allies disagree. But the strength of NATO is that despite these differences, we have always been able to unite around our core task to protect and defend each other because we understand that we are stronger together than apart. I think that 2 world wars and the Cold War taught us that we are stronger together than apart.
But how can you be together when a country is getting its energy from the person you want protection against or from the group that you want protection?
Because we understand that when we stand together, also when dealing with Russia, we are stronger. I think what we have seen is that...
No, you're just making Russia richer. Well, you're not dealing with Russia, you're making Russia richer.
Well, I think that even during the Cold War, NATO allies were trading with Russia. Then there have been disagreements about what kind of trade arrangements we should go
I think trade is wonderful. I think energy is a whole different story. I think energy is a much different story than normal trade. And you have a country like Poland that won't accept the gas. You take a look at some of the countries that won't accept it because they don't want to be captive to Russia. But Germany, as far as I'm concerned, is captive to Russia because it's getting so much of its energy from Russia. So we're supposed to protect Germany, but they're getting their energy from Russia. Explain that. And it can't be explained, you know that.
The president did that with no notes, right in the face of the leader of NATO. And you think Joe Biden can do that? Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who you just saw in that video, we'll have more on that exchange later in the show tonight. But clearly Trump was absolutely dead on accurate. Now compare that to Joe Biden, the self-proclaimed tough guy, foreign policy expert. He can go toe-to-toe with Putin. He promised to stop Putin in his tracks. Well, today, Biden could barely form a coherent sentence as per usual and was unwilling and unable to respond to any questions about Vladimir. Take a look.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Now, you got to let me know when I'm supposed to stop here. But Sylvia, where's Sylvia? There you are, Sylvia. How are you, Sylvia?
We have underestimated Putin.
Thank you. Time to move. Thank you.
We have a mumbling, bumbling buffoon as president. And tomorrow, Joe has 0 events scheduled, none whatsoever. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the American people. But Press Secretary Jen Psaki, she knows who to blame for Russia's aggression. Oh, let's blame Donald Trump. Really, Jen? Take a look.
Does the White House have any reaction to former President Trump calling Putin's move yesterday genius and smart?
Well, as a matter of policy, we try not to take advice from anyone who praises President Putin and his military strategy, which I believe is what happened there. So there's a bit of a different tactic, a bit of a different approach, and that's probably why President Biden and not his predecessor was able to rally the world and the global community in taking steps against Russia's aggression.
Hey, Jen, as a matter of tactic, this didn't happen under Donald Trump. Your boss, Joe, created this problem with his economic and energy dependency policies. Joe is humiliating our entire country on the world stage. He's getting rolled by Putin. It is embarrassing, and he can barely string together a sentence, and I doubt he even knows what day of the week it is. Joe Rogan even said Biden is basically a cognitive shell of his former self. Look at this.
Biden has been in politics his whole life. Like, he understands how the Senate works and so forth. So does that not count as experience?
It kind of does. It kind of does, but not as being, well, he actually was vice president for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
But he's not a good example because he's basically a shell.
Yeah.
You know, cognitively. You don't see that this guy can't talk right anymore.
Yeah.
Go watch videos of him from 20 years ago. He was a dummy. He said a lot of silly. He lied about a bunch of things, but at least he was articulate.
Joe Rogan, we've showed videos from 2008, 2012, 2016. Yeah, everybody notices the obvious cognitive decline. Our friends know it, and unfortunately our enemies also know it, and that includes Vladimir Putin. So now here's an important question. Where do Putin's territorial ambitions end? Because in 2008, Putin invaded Georgia and set up a puppet government. He also set up so-called client states in Moldova and Belarus, right? And under Obama in 2014, remember, that's when they annexed Crimea. Now he's rolling into eastern Ukraine with Kiev in his crosshairs. What's next? Based on his own public remarks, he seems pretty hell-bent on restoring the old Soviet Union. And recently, Putin added all 3 Baltic countries to his official list of so-called unfriendly nations. So what, are they soon now going to be targets of Vladimir Putin's territorial ambitions? And if they are, what's Joey going to do about it? One article put it this way, quote, Baltic citizens worry they are next on Russia's menu. Now, remember, the Baltic states are members of NATO. So does that mean the U.S. would be drawn into a war? I certainly hope and pray not, especially with this guy as commander-in-chief. But as you can see, this has the potential to spiral way out of control very quickly. Weakness should not be an option. That's all I'm seeing right now. It is time for Germany and NATO and Europe, our Western European allies, to break free of their dependence on Russian oil and gas. The only answer, the only country that has more natural resources, oil, gas, coal, that would be us, the United States. And if you really want to beat Putin, we're not going to have a shooting war with Putin. I don't want one. You shouldn't have one. We should flood the market with our own energy supply. That will help with inflation, create high-paying career jobs. It's going to be good for national security. And it's time for Europe to get serious about NATO. They must pay their fair share. They must take their own defense seriously. They must deter future transgressions from Russia. They must stop making Russia and Putin richer than ever. And, of course, that would